So how many of you remember when you had a cell phone only for emergencies and you never turned it on? Yeah, I know all you young ones are going, what? When was that? Okay. Do you remember when you didn't have a username and password for anything? No, there were no usernames and passwords. Who needed that? Okay. Do you remember when we did not have copy machines? We had those, yeah, crank it. We're cranking those machines, purple fingers, yeah, I know. Look at the people around you. You can tell how old you are, whether or not you remember the mimeograph machine. I still think I have those, papers somewhere that we copied from that mimeograph. Those kind of changes that happened were gradual, weren't they? I mean, we didn't go from mimeograph to big blue button in Moodle. Those things happened over time. And had someone said to us, you have to make this big leap, that would have been horribly scary, wouldn't it? I mean, is there anything that is scarier than change? I mean, do we just run out there going, let's find something new to do? Let's see what we can change in what we're doing. I mean, some of us do. We're always looking for that next best thing. But for most of us, change is a pretty scary thing. And one of your major jobs as the educator leader cadre is, as Dave said, to eliminate the pain and to make change more palatable and to make change easier for the people that you're going to be working with. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit. We're going to talk about ways of thinking about change and then how we help facilitate that change. Let's see if okay? So, change is ahead. Well, that's not true. You're in the middle of it, aren't you? We are all in the middle of change. I have to tell you, every time I come to one of these meetings, I learn something new. And last time we were here, Doug Sobdy quoted someone that's always been one of my favorite philosophers, and apparently one of his too, when he quoted Yoda. Yeah, and said, we must unlearn what we learn. We must unlearn what we know. And isn't that what is going on now? Teachers and administrators, specialists at the Department of Ed, we're all having to unlearn the way that we've thought about teaching and learning. We have to make that change. And it's a scary thing. So my question is, have you unlearned anything since you've been here in a day and a half? Are there some things that you've unlearned or that you're thinking about differently? And when that happens, you're not a blank slate, are you? It's not tabula rasa. Something new is created. Some new understanding is created. And isn't that what is really at the heart of education? We learn something, we unlearn it or learn something different, we learn again. That's at the heart of education, and it's at the heart of change. So the question is, why are educators so resistant to change? Okay, let's admit it. Everyone here has been in a professional development opportunity that you did not want to be there for. And it could be this one. We're resistant to change. What are some of the things that we say to justify why we can't change? Yell them out. What are some things No time. No money. It's worked for years. Why change it? We've already done this. It's going to change again. Things are cyclical. What else? This will go away. There'll be a new superintendent. There'll be a new set of standards. I'm just going to wait and see what happens. I'm not going to jump out there and do anything drastic and radical like change what I'm already doing. As a professional development organization, the one that we hear the most working with teachers is, well, that's all well and good for the other people's kids, but my kids can't do that. That school down the road, they could do this more rigorous stuff, but not ours. We just can't do that, you know. And I mean, that's an incredibly sad thing to say, but it's true. We hear it all the time. But where is that coming from? You know, where are all of those things coming from? Are they coming from a place of educators not wanting to do what's right for kids? No, of course not. Is it coming from a sense of cynicism? Maybe some. But for the most part, I think it's coming just from a place of fear, you know. What we've learned with teachers who say, oh, that's really good for other people's kids, but not mine, mine can't do it, is that what they are really saying is, I don't know how to do that. I maybe don't know that content that deeply in order to go that deep with students. I don't know that. I don't have the pedagogy. I don't know the strategies to use. I don't know what to do. And it scares me because as educators, we want, you know, to do the right thing. We want to do what's right. So as we move forward in this, we have to think about that. You're gonna face all of these things. And oftentimes, these are the two reactions you're gonna see. Number one, there are gonna be people who want to ignore it. You know, put my head in the sand, I'm gonna hunker down and hope no one notices me and just kind of do my own thing until this thing passes away. And if I can just hide. And I'm not just talking about teachers, right? There are stakeholders throughout each state and across this country who want to just kind of ignore the whole thing and hope that it goes away, okay? But it's not going away, is it? It's not going away. And the other, you know, run from it. The sky is falling. It's a plague. You know, the world is coming to an end. And in a way, the world as we know it is coming to an end, isn't it? We're moving from something that's known and comfortable. Whether or not you like what your state has done in terms of assessment, you understand it, you know it, you've done it, you know how to prepare kids for that. And now you're going to have to move to something that is unknown and consequently scary. You know, partly scary because you don't really know yet what the assessment completely looks like. It was so helpful yesterday, and it'll be today as well, seeing what those assessments look like. I think that's going to go a long way to start alleviating some of that fear that's out there. But that shift, that change, is going to be hard. It's hard to do. We have to stop doing something we've been doing and start doing something different, right? Bonnie and Doug, as they're talking about the assessments, they're saying over and over, you can't just, it's not the same thing. You can't just take it and put a new name on it or put a new frame around it. You have to substantively change the way you think about instruction and about teaching and learning. So in your role, you have to think about, you know, multiple things. The individual change and the changes at an organizational level, right? And as you know, and Kurt Lewin tells us, is that there's always this battle going on between change and the status quo, right? In any organization at any given time, but particularly in a time like this, when we're undergoing transformational change. Let me give you an example from our own perspective. On January the 1st, LTF merged with the National Math and Science Initiative. So now we are a division of the National Math and Science Initiative. So you bring in two different groups together. And then this month, we also merged Advanced Placement Strategies, another professional development company that focuses on advanced placement and works strictly in Texas. So we have these three groups, two who've worked nationally, one who's only worked in Texas, three groups of former teachers with three distinct programs, three distinct cultures coming together, three distinct processes and technology and the way we address things, and trying to figure out what changes have to take place? What kind of transformational changes have to take place in this organization? It's going to be the same on a campus level, on a district level, on a state level, because of the changes that are embedded in the Common Core State Standards and those changes that are coming about because of the change in assessment, okay? And I'll tell you, there's a lot of fear involved with that. You know, people don't understand where they fall, you know, in this whole piece. So understanding is the first key you're going to have to figure out. Who are those people, or what are those forces, is a better way of saying it. What are those forces that are really pushing things to stay the same? Is it the culture of the school? Is it the attitude of the administrator? Is it the pushback of the teachers? Is it the lack of technology? Is it just the fear of change itself? What are those things that are really driving change? Are there individuals who are really motivated? Are there administrators who think they can mandate change and therefore it will happen? You know, what are those things? Are there professional development opportunities that are really driving that change? And I'll tell you, when you're out there, it is a lot easier to make sustained change if you can figure out those things that are keeping the status quo where they are and try to reduce these. Try to reduce those forces. If there's a lot of fear, to try to reduce that fear. If there are a lot of misconceptions, to reduce those misconceptions. Than it is to mandate from the top change. So something to think about as you work with the ELCs. And this is something we all know, that change is rarely easy and it never happens as fast as we expect. Ask Lynn. She will tell me all the time. I'll say, Lynn, can we do this? She'll say, of course we can do it, Rhonda. And then she'll look at me, and I know she means it depends on how much time and money I have in order to make that happen. And it never happens as fast because I think she does magic. I think she just goes back there and does whatever and sprinkles pixie dust and things happen. And that's just not the way it is, she keeps telling me. So we have to understand this. Yesterday in one of the English sessions, I heard someone say, why do we think that just because we give teachers information or we give them a lesson or we give them something, that they're going to immediately go back, change the way they've always taught, and change the way they think? Change takes time. It takes time to process. It takes time to think about that. And it takes consistency in the things that we do. And if you think about research, particularly on professional development, that's one thing that comes through loud and clear, that it takes a lot of time to change instructional practice. We learned this as an organization when we first started. We created guides of materials. We gave them out to everyone in 4 states. People loved them. They fought over those books, gave them to them for nothing. And then about a month later, we started getting calls. Can you do training? Because no one knows how to use these things. They're great, they're sitting on their shelves, but no one knows how to use it. So simply giving teachers materials is not going to change anything. And when you go in, we're talking about teachers and their changes, are there other people that you have to look at change? And think not just on the campus level, some of you are working at the district level and some of you are at the state level. Who are those people that you have to change? And we've talked some about that. Chad is going to talk some tomorrow about messaging to different people and organizations. We've talked some about the processes and even the technology that you have to make some of these changes. What are those and how do those people and processes interact? But one thing we really have to also think about is the culture. The culture on the campus. Is that culture one that puts a roadblock up to change? Or is it one that's open to that idea? Is the culture in a district such that it's going to support the people and the process in this change, that it's going to have this culture of moving forward? What about at the state level? You know, what is that culture? So something to think about, again, as you go in and work with your different groups. And the other thing we have to remember, and everybody knows this, it's not a destination It's not a one-shot thing. It's a process. Okay, so this whole ELC cadre, we're here for 29 months. We're working through this together, learning from one another, changing together over this period as we go out there and work with other educators, okay? So it's a process. We can't get bogged down and think that it's not. We're asking people to move from what's known and comfortable to what's unknown and scary, you know? And have you ever seen that? When people talk about change, people kind of, you know, just put their hands up like this if you're giving them too much at one point. So, in the context of the change that has to happen because of the Common Core State Standards and the PARCC assessments, I want you to think about some things that I know you already do, and I know you think about them. These are not new ideas. None of these are new ideas. But I want you to think of them through the lens of implementation of the Common Core Standards and then that change of assessment and the implementation of assessment. So, communicating change. As I said, Chad is going to do a great session tomorrow, and you're going to be working on this in your team time about how do we communicate effectively to different groups. One of the things I want to remind you is that you have to define the scope. If change is too big, what happens? You know, we're shutting it down. Well, you can't even go there. If you think about this whole big thing, do you ever get caught up in or paralyzed by the fact that there's so much you have to do, you don't know where to start, don't know what to do, so let's just go have wine instead? I mean, really? I mean, if it's too much, we just don't know how to deal with it, so we do tend to put our heads in the ground and try to just not think about it for a while, okay? So define the scope. Big changes, but we have to break them down into small, manageable chunks, small pieces that people can do and that we can build on as we go. We have to balance the information release. Absolutely, you have to communicate clearly and effectively because the minute you don't share information, what happens? The rumor mill runs rampant. I think I heard it yesterday. I mean, because there are things that we don't know, we hear something from someone and it builds, and it's like telephone, that old thing back when we used to have these kind of telephones, you know, where you had to dial the number back in the day. Balance that information release. Does everybody need to know everything all at one time? That's a really hard thing, isn't it? You've got all this information, you want to share all this information, but if sharing all of the information paralyzes people, is that a good plan? So you really have to know your audience. Balance what you release. It's not like you're trying to hide information, you're not the keeper of the knowledge, but you do have to be judicious in how you dispense the knowledge and information. So just something to think about. Developing messages for particular audiences. Dave hit on this yesterday. Chad is going to hit on this tomorrow, that you have to have a message specific to the group that you're talking about. And then, of course, those feedback loops. If everything is just coming from you, if it's just coming from us, that's not communication. That's not a communication. Communication, there's feedback. So what are your feedback loops going to be? If you are working at the campus level, what are those feedback loops that you have? Is it going to be meeting with teachers on their conference period? You know, what kind of things are you going to do at the state level, at the district level, at the campus level? What kind of feedback loops? Are you going to use social media? How many of you are really involved in social media? Facebook, Twitter, all of that stuff, blogs. Yeah, see, some of you are going like, yeah, but I'm, you know. I confess, I'm going to have to get on Twitter. I mean, it has become clear. But that's not something that's comfortable for me. I can't keep up with my emails, much less Twitter. Did you see how I pushed back on that? That's the kind of pushback we're going to get. But what are those feedback loops? There'll be people like me who are like, if you put it on Twitter, I'm probably going to have to hear it from someone else on my staff. So what feedback loop would work for me? So you've got to know your audience and the people you're working with. So communication, we all know it's key. The other big key to change, and all of these things, are how we motivate people to want to change, right? I mean, that's the first thing in terms of, let me go back to communication, is when you're defining the scope, you've got to make people want to change. What's in it for them? I mean, we're educators, we're all in it for the students, right? Of course. But it's also, how is this going to benefit me? What's it going to do for me? That's just human nature. So think about that as you're working with educators too, as you communicate. And one of the ways that you can do this is to really involve people. You're not the sage on stage, the dispenser of knowledge all the time. You're involving people, getting their ideas, encouraging participation. Collaborate. That collaborative atmosphere and attitude with the people that you are working with. Because let's face it, none of us have all of the answers to how to make all of this happen. But by collaboration and sharing and working together, sharing on a campus, across campuses, across districts, across states, this is an incredible opportunity that we have with Park to really talk to one another and to kind of dissolve those state lines in a way that we've never been able to. And to share best practices. That's one of the reasons that Lynn and her team have worked so hard to set up that ELC portal as a way to collaborate and share information. We want you to share best practices. What worked in your state? What new thing did you try that was really fantastic and you want to share with the other states? And that's part of the ELC charge that we really haven't even talked about. Because the goal here is that before this is over, Achieve and NIMSY are not the ones presenting. You are the ones presenting and sharing the information with other states. And we're going to be making that move much more quickly than you think. So we're going to be asking you, what are the great things you're doing on your campus? What are you doing in your district? What are you doing in your state that might help others inform change? And then that idea of supporting change. Actively listening, putting yourself in someone else's shoes and understanding that they probably are coming from a place of fear. They legitimately don't know what to do. Many people would make a change if they knew what it was supposed to be. They just don't understand. And so really understanding what kind of support and tools people need, whether they be teachers or administrators, what do they need? Or parents, what kind of things do they need? Building those relationships. It's key to change. It's key to everything that this ELC is about, is your ability to go out there and connect with the people that you know and to help drive this change. And then the thing that we have to remember, we talk about all this change, the Common Core Standards is going to change everything we ever know, these assessments are completely different. You and I, we all know that there are wonderful things going on already on your campuses, in your district, and in your state that will not change. They're great, independent of the standards. They're great models of teaching that are going on. There are teachers who've been teaching probably at a much higher level of rigor for a long time, who can be real models. So really celebrating what is great on a campus or a district or in the state. Celebrate the successes, because if all we do is focus on, we just got to change everything, then again, it's too much. No one is going there with you. You will be on that journey alone. So what are the good things that are already going on? Like Yoda, Mark Twain said, education consists of mainly what we have unlearned. It's that process of education. And the thing is, you don't have to do it alone, because you have this amazing group here. And I encourage you to really build relationships with the group here. We don't have any choice. Education is about change. And so let's really focus on what are those really specific things that we have to learn in a different way, that we have to unlearn and relearn. And fear not. Kids are going to be better for this, right? Remember the typewriter? Okay, did anybody else have to type in their typing class in high school before we had keyboarding? Okay, now this is really going to date me. How many of you did not have electric typewriters? Yeah, some of you are going, how did you not have, remember trying to make a correction and it was just easier to start over? Yeah. So we've come a long way, right? Now, is there anyone in here who doesn't have, a laptop or an iPad or some kind of device that you've been taking notes on or tweeting on, today? It's just different. We went through this kind of change, standards, that'll be easy after this kind of transformation. But it took time, didn't it? It's not going to take this long to go from this kind of typewriter to what we have today. But it is a process. It is a process. Because without change, we have, the dodo bird. And we all know what happened to the dodo bird. So if we don't make these changes, the great promise that we have in the Common Core State Standards, the promise that all students will have a quality education, that all students will be college and career ready, that all students get to work at a higher standard of rigor, that's an incredible promise. Without the kind of change that has to happen, it won't come to fruition. It's just not going to happen. So instead, we need to think about this transformational change, this substantive change that we're going through, and that we're not alone, that it is a process, that it may start out ugly, but it's going to get better, and because of it, kids are going to be better. I don't know if anybody else here gets upset by things that you read in the newspaper or hear on the news about educators that may not always be, positive sometimes. I see this as a real opportunity to demonstrate how educators can drive change nationally in education, how we can work within and across disciplines, within and across campuses, within and across states, to make real change. That's the promise of the Common Core Standards and the PARCC assessments. And in order to do that, you are one piece in that journey, that transformational journey. So, nothing really new in this information that I've shared with you about change, but I want you to think about it through the lens of the Common Core Standards, the PARCC assessments, and your role in this ELC. And like everything else, we're going to ask you, Lynn talked a little bit about the takeaways. Yesterday I asked you to think about the takeaways in the sessions you were. What are the 3 takeaways from the sessions that you've attended today? Some great information in that panel discussion. What are some things there that you really want to make sure that you go back and share? What are those kinds of information? And how will that information, that strategy or that idea, aid in the implementation of these standards? For you personally, some of the things that you've heard may not be new, but how can you take this information and use it for people who don't have the level of knowledge and expertise that you have? And that's something to really think about.